Welcome back to the Charismatic Voice. I am fascinated by how Chino Moreno blurs the line between whisper and sung music. And I want to analyze his voice a lot more, beginning with a seasonally appropriate song. Let's get to it. Well, that's gnarly. There's so much dissonance in the pitch choices in here. A lot of times when they could choose to resolve a particular passage or structure, instead they're deliberately choosing to linger in something that brings more tension into the music. I might pull up my keyboard a little here to give you an example. Like, what if this happened? What if this happened? We'll see if my keyboard starting up crashes the computer. Hopefully it doesn't, because that would ruin this. We're gonna go back to the beginning. But right before I hit start on this and start, figuring out some pitches here, I just have to say, y'all like die-hard Deftones fans might hate me for this comment, but I think that Deftones to me it's like a mixture. We've got some System of a Down, maybe even a little bit of Tool in there, and we got a little bit of Billie Eilish. Her super, super hushed singing style, actually, especially here in this part, it's so similar to what Chino does. It's like amazing. It's so like tender and personal, mixed with such heavy. It's cool. Okay. Oh, no, it did start. Okay, okay, I did it. It's All right, so he sings those pitches on, I think, over. Let's see, is that in? Yeah, tell me when it's over. Check it out one more time, and we'll talk about why those pitches are so interesting. So normally it would just go down to here. And if you listen instead, he goes down to here. And this pitch is a half step away from this pitch. It wants to resolve the tension that's created between those two pitches. A half step is an extremely tense interval. It builds musical tension. It's not just these two pitches that are fighting against each other, sort of wanting to merge into one, but it's all of the pitches that are in the overtone series above. So there's a bunch of pitches that are contained even in one pitch that are considered overtones or harmonics. And not only does the fundamental pitch in this case want to resolve, but all of those overtones and harmonics are also battling each other. They're so close and they're just like, I can't stand it anymore. If you just went back here, it would have been a much more stable melody. But instead he goes down here, which is, even because of the key, it's an even more exciting instability. It is a very, very bold choice. And even when we're looking at some of the initial instrumental parts, we're getting this kind of pattern. There's another popular song that does that I was just analyzing. Well, it's not at the top of my head right now. You guys might be able to name off some, though, that bring this kind of theme in. And this is an octave jump that, again, that top note is also 1/2 step away from the other one. It's so much tension that's introduced in both the instrumental and the harmony. I'm going to go back to the beginning one more time. Try to see if you can identify half steps. That there's lots of other intervals that are dissonant. I think we might have even had an augmented fourth in there at one point. And you're like, even more dissonant. But if you can just start to recognize when one pitch is really close to another one and it's creating this kind of thing, maybe play the Jaws theme in your head. That is one of the ways that you can begin to recognize dissonance and maybe how that dissonance could be resolved to give the song a totally different flavor. Pull up a little bit. Bum, bum. That is a funky one too. That's so bold. Oh my. Oh my. That was unexpected and delightful at the same time. Woo! We have a lot of vocal technique to talk about in this so far. Where to begin? I'm going to roll it back, and I think I'm going to pause it at various steps along the way to talk about specific moments. So let's just come back to here-ish, and we'll just talk about some of the starting vocal technique. That actually is a really great example right there. So first bet. This is this airy, almost Billie Eilish kind of timbre, though I don't know if I've ever heard Billie Eilish break out into full scream. Kudos to her when she someday does that. She pushes boundaries. I really like what she's doing. I really like what Chino Moreno is doing here. And this is a very airy, it's not just airy in the tone, but he's also having air escape around any actual singing. So we need to define what airy really is, what that comes from, what that means functionally in your vocal tract. If your vocal folds, right here, when you start to sing, air comes up, it goes past the vocal folds. They start to go wacka, wacka, wacka really fast, right? Concert A, which is the note that orchestra's tuned to, that's 440 times per second. Your vocal folds go wacka, wacka, wacka to create a concert A. That's really fast. Now, if there's air before the pitch actually engages, so before the vocal folds start, vibrating away, wobbling away, if the air comes through before, we're just going to hear air, maybe a little bit of noisiness in the air, but not really a pitch yet. The pitch happens when we get that regularity of vibration, oscillation. There's also ways that the air can continue after the pitch is started. He, if I have a H ahead of time, he, or he, and I have a gasp afterwards, he, and I have air that pushes out past the pitch. Those are examples of how I can have more air in the sound. And you can also have air that's involved in the actual tone. So sometimes this will be seen, and there's like an area of the vocal folds, it's called a vocal chink sometimes, where the folds, instead of, I'm going to turn it this way so you can see, they don't necessarily completely come together. There might be like a little area that is left open. My fingers are managing okay. I hope you could see that. So there's a vocal chink that can happen that's actually, it can be quite large in some females' anatomy in particular, which is why you might have more airiness in certain female singers. There's also how much of the vocal fold is coming together. So if we're sort of zooming in this way, so right, the vocal fold, the wacka wacka, I'm turning it this way. Okay, and the vocal folds go like that if we zoom in really far. So you're looking here, there's muscles on the side here, and they actually do this little wavy motion as the air is coming up. And sometimes there isn't as much of the vocal fold that actually connects. So that depends often on TA and CT, thyroretinoid or cricothyroid activation. And you might have this part up here that's just connecting this much and letting a little bit more air into the sound. So there's lots of different ways that you can get air into the sound of a voice. I find it fascinating to listen to Chino Moreno because he's using like all of the methods. I don't know if he has a vocal chink that's particularly big. I would have to really see down his throat to know about that, but he uses so much air in his sound, especially in this opening section. I'm going to go back and catch that one more time. Listen to the offset. So when he finishes a particular pitch, how much extra air he continues to add. And lots of loud breathing. The way he says that, I thought he said sex the first time. It is so seductive. It has like a little creak going on in the voice too. Now I'm looking at the lyrics and it hits the 6 and it's summer. But I think that he put that expression in there like that to make it sound like sex. Who else is with me? I think he did that on purpose. And right there, there's a creak that he's using. That's called a creak. When we talk about some vocal terminology, this kind of sound. Sometimes we'll use that to get into a particular note, that kind of sound. It's also vocal fry. We're not talking about fry screams here or a fry register, which can also be called a pulse register. But we're talking about fry as in the vocal folds are trying to come together, but there is not enough air pressure to create that oscillation, meaning the regular vibration yet. It's a very complex system, in case you haven't realized that. So he does this creaking sound there, which is fascinating, and particularly fascinating when you think about how much air he has in his sound overall, yet that particular technique is actually created by an absence of air pressure, right? I hope you appreciate it more now, because when I first heard it, I was like, oh, wow, he's got so much air control. This is awesome. So I would describe that as a pitched scream, right? And I think this is really important to define if a scream is pitched or not, by the way. I think it's really important because that comes back to which anatomy is involved in the creation of this scream. We've seen that if, oh man, I'm going to toss out some possible terms here. Things like a creak or fry register. There are terms that have already been established, and there's some fussing over them. But then there are also terms that really haven't been established. And most of those are actually around any sort of distortion, like these screams that we're hearing. There's a lot of stuff that's being thrown up in the air, and nothing has been settled on in the scientific community. When you ask singers about it, they all call it different things. And believe me, it's frustrating for me too. And then coaches are calling it different things too. I really want to get everybody on the same page at some point. What I like to define between a pitch scream and what I'll sometimes call a pure harsh vocal. And this is because in a pitched scream, we have that pitch that's coming from oscillation, right? The true vocal folds are going wacka, 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 creating a pitch. They have this ability to vibrate regularly. And that makes it so we actually hear this versus other structures above the true vocal folds in our throat. They're just not made in the same way. They're different fleshy bits. They don't have the same stratification or tissue makeup that makes it possible to make that really regular vibration, at least they're not as organized in the tissue as the true vocal folds. There's some theory that maybe they could be used to make a pitch, which I think is very interesting. And we can get into that later in more science. But that being said, all of those structures above, they can still go wacka, wacka, wacka. I like to call it smacka, smacka, smacka in this case, because they make distortion. They make that, like that kind of sound that you'd go as like a Cookie Monster. There's kinds of like amazing sounds that sound like howler monkeys. But then you put a lot more air pressure behind them, and suddenly you get this like terrifying monster from a video game that is like a total boss, and you're just going to have to probably die like at least 100 times if you're in Dark Souls before you're going to kill him. Anyhow, that level, when you get the wacka wacka or the smacka 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 up there, and you combine it with the wacka 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 from the vocal folds, that's what I call a pitched scream. If we're just getting the smacka smacka smacka, sometimes I'll call that pure harsh vocals because we might not have the true vocal folds involved in that. Here, I definitely hear both things going, and it's terrifying in the best of ways. Okay, if you're playing Dark Souls and the boss screamed at you that way, how many times would you expect to die before killing him? Real question. Go. Did you guys catch the creak that he did going into this sung section? Since we talked about the thing before, listen to the creak that happens right before he starts singing this line. Still screaming, still screaming. There. Did you catch it? One more time. Oh man, a pig is going down into an area where lots of sharks live. No wonder the Jaws reference worked so well earlier. I have a serious technical question though before we get to the devouring of poor bacon. I'm seeing this floating in the water happening. Obviously, they're on some sort of rafts, platforms here. I see lots of electronic instruments. How do they get power out there? Like, I know this is a music video, obviously. Like, this is not the recorded sound that we're hearing. But is it possible? Could somebody actually perform like this? This might be a good question for Tank the Tech, whose channel I really, really enjoy, by the way. Shout out to Tank! We love you! Is it possible? Would these be battery-powered amps? Is that a terrible idea? I mean, I do definitely see like water bits on the cameras here, and I saw microphones too. Is this possible? And if it were possible, who would attend the concert? Is this like for yacht owners only? I'm not sure, but I am a big believer that the future is going to be filled with wild concert venues, ones that are an experience to attend. So this is giving me ideas that are probably all bad. Just so, like, what's the practicality of doing this? Tell me. Sorry, Piggy. So moody. That's high scream. High is just like so. That's a word, I swear. Yikes. It's interesting how the bass even feels like it's got an underwater sound right now. Sharks are scary, man. As a boy mom, I have this moment like at least once a week where I'm like, I'm glad you haven't become obsessed with sharks yet. They're scary. They're scary, man. Cars, sure. Cars are scary sometimes too. Dinosaurs, yes. Yes. Dinosaur and dragon obsessions, I am there for those. Sharks are scary. I love how moody this is. So let's get a little more specific about what anatomy I feel is actually being used. And I'm going to be straightforward with you. We do not have enough research or data out there to say definitively what anatomy is being used here. This is why I am currently running a Kickstarter to support vocal research. I am donating my time, donating all kinds of awesome things to help support vocal research. If you are interested in supporting vocal research, which I really hope you are, check it out. I will pin some comments about it. And this is specifically to study how distortion is created. That might be like grit or gravel or full on screaming, like what Chino is doing here. We want to put a camera down at least 6 more artists' throat. We did this once with Bill Ramos. We want to put a camera down and look at the structures. It's totally not actually going to hurt any of the singers. Okay, I would never do that to a singer. I'm completely supportive of singers. I'm probably far more mama bear for singers than even their managers of the teams, because I've been there and I know how hard it is to be a singer. So camera's going to go down the throat, going to take a look at these. We also have MRIs that we're putting singers through to see all of that movement in real time. We saw the tongue movement from Will, and like the team was blown away. And we'll also, for those that are willing, put these a little they're like tiny. They're needles that have a little wire that go into the muscles to measure muscle activation, in addition to some breath measurements and acoustic measurements as well. So all of those things, we want to do this to at least 6 more singers with their hopefully like enthusiastic support as well. And in order to do it, we have to raise money because research takes a lot of money. That means years of data that researchers go through. It's not just the singer's time. So, but what we've gathered so far is it seems like there are lower constrictions and upper constrictions and sometimes some mixing of those constrictions in the throat. You have your vocal folds. There's the false vocal folds, which are right above your true vocal folds. So you create a pitch, and then right above it is another fleshy bit that looks kind of similar to the true vocal folds. And when those two things go together, we have Tuvan throat singing. Okay. Or you might have subharmonics, like what Jeff Castellucci does. That is definitely not the same sound that Chino is making here. I do not hear false folds working in in symphony with the true vocal folds. Otherwise, it would be a much lower sound. I do hear true vocal folds though, and I hear what sounds to me like mostly upper constriction. So when we're way up there, one of the things that we've seen is a lot of epiglottis involved to really help narrow the space so that the fleshy bits can come and have a little more collision together. There might be some arytenoids that are involved in this sound or ariepiglottic folds. I wouldn't be surprised, but it's really hard to tell. When I've seen a sound similar to this on camera, it kind of just looks like a bit of a butthole in a throat. Sorry. It just looks like something gets squeezed. Not as squeezed as a tea kettle scream gets, but put pitch together with a lot of constriction in the upper part of the throat. I think that's what we're getting here. I'm going to go back a little bit. This is such an incredible expression, right? It's wild. It expresses so much angst. It feels like a defiant scream. I love all of the different emotions that become available when a singer has access to sounds like this. This is one of the reasons I want to understand better how it's being done safely, how people are able to create this sound without tearing apart their vocal folds, because we know now that that is possible. When you have a singer like Chino, actually, I'm not sure what his vocal health is like, but I know that there are many, many singers who have made these kinds of sounds for years and years and years and never need to go see a doctor. That tells you that they're not hurting themselves. If you can tour and do this, even for just a couple of years, if you can do that sustainably while touring, something's right. It's not somebody shredding their vocal folds. It's something different. We're going to change that misconception. Okay? Back one more time. Oh, I wish I could see how he does this live. This is one of those moments where I really wish I did have a live video to watch. I know my team went through several different live ones and just felt that the audio quality, especially for Chino's voice, it wasn't mixed high enough to get into a real deep analysis. And since his voice is often relying on that really intimate kind of sound, I said, let's just do the studio version here. But if anybody has like a fantastic live version they want to post in the comments, I'd be super interested in seeing that, just so I can really see what he's doing in a live performance situation to support this sound. Like one of the things that I've been looking a lot into is how much of this extrinsic muscles, so muscles that are really on the outside of the larynx, we tend to see a lot of bracing of those when you get into screams. There's various theories going around that maybe there's just a lot of breath pressure that's being held back by all of those extra structures. But I would really be curious to see what his neck is doing, as well as what his mouth shape is doing, because these screams are, they use so much more manipulation of the tongue than even clean singing does a lot of times. So anyhow, if you guys have a great link to that, please post it in the comments below. I'd love to see it. Doing a great job of switching between cleans and harshes. Skateboarding in the water. I like that ending. I like the way it brought us back to the just total distortion, twisty sounds. Uh, there's this sort of amazing, comforting feeling out on the water and with all of the ambiance swirling around. It's very atmospheric. But then all of a sudden, it just feels like something that's sort of shaking your world throughout. I think that's a fascinating combination that might feel very much like a person's exterior and interior, often battling for what gets to be loud or quiet at any given moment. This was truly fascinating. I'm going to put up a playlist of some more analysis of some cleans and harsh vocals that I think would be particularly interesting to look at. And I'm going to include on that list also the various science that we've already looked at. So if you're curious about some of those procedures and what a person's throat looks like when a camera's down there, check out this playlist. And may you fall more in love with music every day.